the weakest meat. The crate hissed open with a hydraulic sigh, releasing a gust of sterile, chilled air into the thick jungle heat. Inside, curled in the fetal position among a few metal rations and a standard oxygen bubble, was a man. Human. Male. Mid-30s. Unarmed. Breathing. To the predators gathered around the pod, he looked exactly like what they expected. Soft, undermuscled, frail. One of them, a burly creature with charcoal scales and talons as thick as human fingers, let out a disappointed grunt. "This is the prey the Terran Exchange sent," it growled in fluent galactic common. "They couldn't even send us a fighter." Beside him stood the hunt's overseer, Alpha Commander Vurak of the Kael'Shar, his obsidian eyes narrowing. Tall and broad-shouldered, covered in reflective, armored hide, he was built like something out of a nightmare. His people were the galaxy's apex predators. Fast, powerful, with centuries of military hunting culture. He didn't just kill, he made prey suffer. Vurak stepped forward, studying the human still curled inside the pod. The man didn't tremble. He didn't cry or scream like the others usually did. He just blinked, eyes adjusting slowly to the jungle light. Then he sat up. Vurak spoke, voice deep and lined with boredom. "Species, Homo sapiens. Classification, mammal. Role meat." A ripple of laughter passed through the hunters behind him, Kael'Shar and other predator elites. Some even growled in amusement. The human looked up at the sound. His face was worn, weathered but calm. Brown eyes moved from Vurak to the others, scanning, not with panic, but calculation. That caught Vurak's attention. "Do you speak?" the commander asked. The human nodded slowly. "Yes. What is your name, pray?" "Elias Vorn." Vurak stepped closer, looming. "Remember it well. It will be your name when it is etched into the killboard, alongside your blood." Elias's gazed in flinch. "Then you'd better learn how to spell it." A few of the predators paused, uncertain. The bravado. It wasn't the first time they'd seen defiance, but this wasn't the desperate kind. It was something colder, measured. Vurak crouched slightly, talons clicking against the edge of the pod. "Tell me, Elias Vorn, do you know what's coming?" "I do. You are prey. You will run. You will be hunted. You will die." Elias tilted his head, voice calm and unshaken. "Maybe, or maybe I'll surprise you." Vurak snarled, then straightened, bored again. No human has lasted more than 4 days in the preserve. Most are torn apart in 2. The crate's automated systems disengaged. Metal clasps opened with a hiss. Elias stood, slowly, joints popping from cryosuspension. He wore only a sleeveless tunic and utility pants. No armor, no tools, no weapons, just skin and bone and something else in his eyes. A darkness, not rage, not fear, just a kind of quiet depth that made even one of the lesser hunters shift uncomfortably. He stepped forward, barefoot, into the mud. "Then let's make this interesting." The command chip in his neck blinked red. The hunt had officially begun. The field was now live. Automated drones recorded everything. Kill confirmation, movement, heart rate. Elias Vorn walked into the jungle. Vurak turned away. "Begin countdown. Give him 10 minutes." The hunters spread out, some chuckling, some stretching, cracking claws, adjusting visors. Another human hunt. Another boring kill. But Vurak lingered a moment longer. Something in the man's posture unsettled him. Not fear, not bravado, readiness. 10 minutes passed. The horns blared. The hunt was on. 3 hours later, the Kael'Shar recon drone recorded the first anomaly. A tripwire made from vines and a snapped drone stabilizer, laid across a path used exclusively by the predators. 5 hours in, the body of a juvenile Zarn, one of the hunters, was found suspended upside down, neck snapped cleanly. A crude sign was nailed into the dirt below him. "Not me." Vurak stood over the body, staring. The others whispered. No prey left signs. No prey killed. This wasn't running. This was planning. One of his lieutenants, sharp-toothed and jittery, asked, "What kind of prey does this?" Vurak didn't answer. He just looked deeper into the jungle. Far beyond, in the shadows between trees, Elias watched them. Silent. Still, and he smiled just a little, because they thought he was prey. But Elias Vorn knew predators, and he knew how to break them. Meat with teeth. The jungle was louder now. Birds didn't sing here. There were no birds, but the alien foliage creaked, hissed, and occasionally screamed. It wasn't alive in the way Earth's forests were. It was hunting in its own way. This planet, like its guests, had a taste for blood. But Elias Vorn didn't fear the screams. He used them. He moved through the terrain like smoke, fluid, silent, impossible to track. He'd stripped his tunic days ago and caked his skin with a foul-smelling blue mud to mask his scent and temperature. Every footstep was calculated, every breath measured. His heart beat steady. He wasn't just surviving. He was stalking. At the Kael'Shar camp, unease was turning to anger. "This is absurd," snarled Threx, one of Vurak's lieutenants. "We're wasting time. He's a human. We've hunted Drakkar beasts blind through sulfur storms. This should have been over in hours." Vurak didn't reply. He stood at the edge of the central command node, staring at a projection of the terrain. 8 hunters had gone out. 4 dead. 1 they'd found torn apart in a pit. A pit for Void's sake, with sharpened spikes at the bottom. Another had wandered too close to a ridge where Elias had collapsed a tree above him. The other 2? Missing. No blood. Just gone. "Are we sure it's just him?" another hunter asked quietly. "No human ever hunted like this," Threx growled. Vurak's voice was low, sharp. "No, this one does." The command screen flickered. Elias had hijacked a relay drone. His voice, calm, quiet, and maddeningly precise, echoed through their calms. 4 down. I hope the next are smarter." Silence fell. Then Elias spoke again, quieter now. "You don't understand what we are. You think we run, that we scream, that we beg, that we break. But that's only the weak ones. The rest of us? We're the reason predators have nightmares." Elias crouched in the crook of a dead tree, watching the commotion in the distance. They were flailing now, breaking formation. They didn't understand it yet, but they were bleeding discipline. He hadn't been a soldier. He'd been worse. Back on Earth, he'd served in SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. He'd helped design psychological trials for POWs. He'd seen what isolation did to people, what fear could turn strong men into. Predators were no different, just animals with egos. And egos could be broken. He smiled faintly as he checked the crude motion sensors he'd repurposed from the broken drone. The Kael'Shar were big, heavy-footed, proud. He could hear them when they thought they were silent. 3 were circling his position. He let them come. One of the hunters, a Kael'Shar named Rivek, spotted movement near a ravine, a shadow darting behind a tree. He growled into his comm, "I have eyes." Confirming target. He moved swiftly, claws extended, eyes gleaming. Just like he'd been trained. Just like Elias expected. He didn't see the wire until his foot caught it. There was no explosion. Just a snap, and a blunt branch swung down with bone-breaking force, slamming into Rivek's faceplate and sending him tumbling down the ravine. He was alive, but not conscious. Elias watched from above, not gloating, not celebrating, just confirming. 3 down. Back at the camp, Vurak smashed the table with a snarl. "This ends now." He gathered the remaining hunters. "We split into pairs. No more solo paths. No more overconfidence. He's not prey. He's a tactical adversary." Threx, still bitter, muttered, "He's a human." Vurak turned, eyes blazing. "And he's out hunting us." The others fell silent. Night fell fast in the preserve. The sky was a seething red, the moons hanging like eyes. Elias sat by a small pit of coals, just warm enough to dry the sweat and blood from his skin. He was tired. Muscles ached. His stomach growled. But the cold part of his mind, the one that never slept, was fully awake. He remembered what they said when they dumped him in the preserve. Prey. He'd been that once. On Earth. Before the wars. Before the world burned and people learned what it really meant to survive. Now, he wasn't prey. He was a mirror. He showed monsters what they feared most. A smarter monster. As the night air howled and the predators slept uneasily in their armored tents, Elias carved another mark into a piece of bark. Each one was a message. Not to them. To himself. You're still alive. They're not invincible. Keep going. He placed the bark gently under a root where they'd find it next. On it, he had written 3 words. I see you. The predator's fear. The sun never truly rose on this world. It hung there, bloated and red, casting the jungle in a permanent state of dim twilight. The trees stood still, almost reverent, like the planet itself knew something had changed. Elias Vorn wasn't prey anymore. He was hunting. Threx was the first to feel it. That gnawing discomfort, the pressure on the back of his neck. He shifted uneasily as he scanned the tree-line. His partner, Kor, said nothing, but Threx could see it in his twitching claws and the slight tremble in his tail. They were supposed to be predators, Kael'Shar, the galaxy's top-tier hunters. But right now, they were scared. Something's watching us, Threx whispered, sweeping his plasma repeater across the brush. I swear I... Snap! A sudden blur shot from the undergrowth. Kor shrieked, and then he was just gone. No blood, no scream, just absence. Threx froze, heart hammering. Then he saw it. The crude vine snare wrapped around Kor's ankle, the trail leading up into the canopy. But there was no time to trace it. A shape dropped silently from above. Only a shadow, but it made no sound when it moved, no breath when it struck. Threx fired wildly, plasma bolts tearing through the trees. Nothing. Only a voice from everywhere and nowhere, whispered, "Told you I'd surprise you." Back at the mobile camp, Virak stared at the updated tactical feed. 2 more gone. Only 4 remained, himself included. The rest had vanished or died in conditions that mocked every rule of the hunt. There were no honorable kills. No teeth or claws. Just traps, confusion, and a suffocating sense of control that should have been theirs. He clenched his fists. "This is impossible," muttered the tech officer, a 4-eyed reptilian named Driel. "He's human. This planet is rated Class 9, lethal for even seasoned Kael'Shar. He's not supposed to last half a day." Virak's voice was low and flat. "He's not surviving." The room went silent. "He's winning." Elias sat high in the canopy, eating a strip of dried meat he'd stolen from a fallen hunter. His hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, but his eyes remained sharp, watching the glowing dots of the Kael'Shar tracking drones move below him. They were trying to adapt now, pairing up, changing patterns. Virak was getting desperate, which meant the others were nervous, and when predators got nervous, they got sloppy. But Elias felt something else too, the cost. His body ached. Every muscle screamed. He hadn't slept properly in days. A sharp thorn had pierced his foot, now swollen and tender. And deep down, under the sharp edge of his focus, a creeping cold voice whispered, "You're still human. You'll break. Eventually." But he ignored it. He remembered something his seer instructor once told him, back in the wet woods of Oregon. You don't beat the wild. You become something worse than it. At the camp, Virak stood alone in front of the fire. He'd ordered the others to rest. Not that anyone could. He reached for his comm and opened a private channel to the warship orbiting above. "Commander Virak, status update. The human designated Elias Vorn is proving anomalous. Tactical reclassification requested." There was a pause, then a dry, mechanical reply. "Please confirm reclassification request. Current, prey class tier 0. Suggested reclassification." Virak stared into the flame. It licked the air like a living thing. He thought of Revek's body dangling from a tree, of Threx's last transmission, nothing but a stifled breath and a single, terrified "he's here." He gritted his teeth. Predator class. Tier 2, possibly higher. Noted, that is unprecedented for a human. He is not like the others. Virak's voice dropped. He watches. He waits. He chooses who dies. Acknowledged. Shall we authorize orbital retrieval? Virak hesitated. It would mean forfeiting the hunt. It would mean admitting fear. But before he could respond, the fire cracked, and something slid from the shadows behind him. A carved piece of bark, set carefully, deliberately, words etched in blood and ash. "You still think this is a hunt? I'm culling you." Elias hadn't intended to leave it so close to the fire. But he wanted Vurak to feel it, not just read it. He wanted him to know that every move he made was watched, that every step deeper into the jungle was one step closer to judgment, that the line between predator and prey had blurred, and now it was just a matter of who broke first. He didn't enjoy it. Not really, but there was satisfaction, a grim, cold satisfaction in forcing a monster to feel the one emotion it never thought it would: fear. And somewhere in the jungle's choking silence, the wind carried a soft, unfamiliar sound. Laughter. Human. When the predator bleeds, the jungle was bleeding, not from its vines or thick-rooted trees, but from the sounds. They had changed. The constant screeches and wails of distant wildlife had gone silent, replaced by an emptiness that swallowed even the wind. It was the kind of silence that comes only when something has claimed the territory. And tonight, it belonged to Elias Vorn. He knelt by a shallow pool, washing blood, not his own, from his hands. His reflection stared back at him, gaunt, eyes sunken, face streaked with grime and focus. The man in the water didn't look human anymore. He looked like something made to kill gods. The last two Kael'Shar were dead, one impaled after chasing a false heat signature into a spike trap. The other had shot himself in a panic after Elias used a mimic drone to imitate the scream of a fallen comrade. Elias hadn't needed strength. He'd used fear, doubt, silence. Now only one remained: Vurak. The Kael'Shar commander stood alone in the clearing, armor dull beneath the twilight glow. His claws were stained, not with blood, but with the weight of his own mistakes. Around him, trees bore markings, claw marks, traps, broken drones, ghosts of a hunt that had turned into a war. He knew Elias was near. He could feel it in the way the jungle watched him. The air trembled with anticipation. Enough hiding, Vurak growled. Face me. Fight me. End this. There was no answer. Only the wind, brushing against the leaves like breath. Elias watched from above, crouched in the branches of a tree like a wraith. Every bone in his body ached. His left leg throbbed from the thorn he still hadn't removed. He hadn't eaten in nearly a day, but he wasn't thinking about pain. He was thinking about honor. They'd dumped him here to die, to be sport. Vurak's kind called it a ritual, a noble tradition. But to Elias, it was slaughter masquerading as glory. He hadn't come here to be prey. He'd come to put down a rabid animal. With slow precision, Elias dropped from the tree. His feet landed soundlessly behind Vurak. I'm right here, he said. Vurak spun, and for the first time, he hesitated. Elias wasn't what he expected. He wasn't large or armored or visibly armed. He was just a man, lean, hollow-eyed, wrapped in dried leaves and sweat, holding nothing but a sharpened metal shard wrapped in cloth. But it was his eyes that made Vurak pause. There was no fear in them, only judgment. I should have killed you the moment the crate opened, Vurak said, circling slowly. You tried, Elias replied. You called me meat. You are meat. Elias didn't smile. So are you. You just forgot it. With a roar, Vurak lunged, claws swinging with deadly precision. Elias ducked, rolling across the earth, coming up with the blade ready. It wasn't a clean fight. There was no glory in it. It was mud, breath, blood, and bone. It was survival. Vurak struck again, claws grazing Elias's shoulder. Elias retaliated with a slash across the side of Vurak's neck. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. The commander stumbled back, touched his wound, looked at the blood on his hand. He bled. Elias rose to his feet, panting. You're not invincible, he said. You just never fought someone who understood what it meant to be hunted. Vurak bared his fangs. You think you've won? You're still trapped here with me. Elias stepped forward, no fear in his stance. No, you're trapped here with me. The next strike came fast, wild, Vurak losing discipline, rage replacing calculation, and Elias used it. He pivoted, guiding the larger creature's momentum straight into a jagged stump, slamming the blade deep into the soft tissue just beneath Vurak's armored rib cage. The Kael'Shar let out a guttural, shocked breath. Elias leaned in, eyes locked with his. You thought power made you a predator, but real predators don't chase. They wait. They watch, and they end you before you even know you're dying. Vurak dropped to one knee. His breathing slowed. His final words were not of defiance, but awe. "You're not prey." Elias knelt beside him, whispering, "No, I'm what hunts the things that hunt us." And then it was over. As the sun dipped behind the thick canopy, Elias dragged Vurak's body to the center of the clearing. He placed it there, not as a trophy, but a message. To the orbiting warship, to the species who believed in bloodsport, to anyone watching. A flare shot into the sky, one final signal. Prey, survived. Predators, terminated. Hunt, complete. And as the extraction shuttle descended from the clouds, Elias Vorn stood alone in the clearing, bruised, bloodied, breathing. Still human. But not just human. He was respected now, because the apex predator had called him Sir. A new kind of silence. The transport shuttle rose slowly through the red mist of the jungle, carrying Elias Vorn away from the killing ground that had become his proving ground. He sat motionless inside the craft, half-shadowed by the flickering emergency lights, his eyes fixed on the blood-stained strip of cloth still wrapped around his hand. Not his blood. Theirs. He should have felt triumph. He didn't. The ship's AI had offered food, water, and medical scans the moment the doors sealed. Elias declined them all. He leaned his head back and stared at the metal ceiling, counting the hums of the engines. The silence after survival was always the hardest part. It was where the memories crawled back in. He could still hear their footsteps in the brush, their snarling, their boasts. He could still feel the weight of the first kill, the crack of bone, the warmth of alien blood soaking through his shirt. Not because he wanted to, but because a part of him had been forced to become like them to live. And that part wasn't quiet anymore. 2 days later, Elias stood in front of a tribunal aboard the Obsidian Reach, a Kael'Shar dreadnought turned temporary diplomatic chamber. The room was lined with warriors, delegates, and translators. Tension pulsed like a living thing. He wore no armor, just simple black fatigues and a bandaged arm. The Kael'Shar delegation sat in silent fury. Their eyes burned with shame. Their commander, their apex predator, had not only been bested, but hunted. On the other side stood the Terran envoy, flanked by a handful of off-world diplomats. They didn't speak, only watched Elias with quiet awe. The head arbitrator, a neutral arbiter species known as the Valari, finally spoke. "Human Elias Vorn," it said in its soft, multi-toned voice, "you stand as the sole survivor of the Kael'Shar Blood Preserve Initiative. All 11 participants were confirmed deceased, yourself excluded. We are here to determine the consequences of your unexpected outcome." Elias didn't move. "Do you wish to speak?" the Valari asked gently. He raised his head. "I didn't win your game," Elias said, voice quiet but unwavering. "I ended it." A pause. "I was sent there as prey, unarmed, unwarned, hunted for amusement. But I didn't just survive. I adapted. I made them feel the fear they've dealt to others for decades. I made them understand it." The room rippled with unease. The Kael'Shar chancellor stood. His voice was a low growl. "You insult our traditions." Elias didn't blink. "Your traditions are built on arrogance. You didn't expect prey to think, to fight. You expected us to scream. You didn't expect someone like me. You murdered our warriors. You murdered mine first." A heavy silence fell. And then, something unexpected happened. The Kael'Shar chancellor slowly sat back down and said nothing. Later, in a private chamber, the Terran envoy, Admiral Rhea Marlowe, approached Elias. Her eyes scanned him like a battlefield, searching for signs of damage, loss, or weakness. She found none. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. Elias didn't look up. "Survived?" She shook her head. "No. You changed the galaxy." He met her eyes now. The Kael'Shar just had their apex predator taken down by a human with no armor, no weapons, and no backup. Words already spreading. The other species are watching. The balance of power just shivered. He didn't respond. His silence was heavier than words. "We want you to come back with us," she continued. "Help us train survival teams. Special tactics. Psychological warfare. They'll listen to you now. You've got command-level clearance, Elias." He finally spoke. I don't want to be a hero. You're not, she said quietly. You're a warning. In the following weeks, whispers spread across mercenary channels. They called him the ghost of the preserve. Among diplomats, he was the exception, a symbol that humans were no longer to be underestimated. And among the Kael'Shar, they didn't speak his name. But when it was mentioned, even in passing, their warriors went silent. Not out of hatred, out of respect, because even their fiercest apex had fallen. And in his final breath, he had called the man who brought him down, Sir. Months later, on a backwater moon, a young Kael'Shar trainee stood before a fire, nervously adjusting his armor. He was about to enter a trial, a simulated hunt. But before he stepped into the arena, his mentor stopped him. There's something you need to remember, the elder growled. What? The old warrior's eyes narrowed. Prey does not mean weak. Not anymore. The jungle listens differently now. There are stories of a man, a Terran, who made death wait, who made the hunt bleed. The younger warrior scoffed. Just a myth. The elder leaned in, voice a whisper. He wasn't a myth. He nodded toward the trees. He was the warning. And in the shadows of every world where predators roamed, one name began to echo softly. Not in fear, in memory. Elias Vorn, the man who refused to die on their terms. The man who made the apex bow.